Welcome. We are thrilled you're joining us for today's deep dive. I want you to picture a scenario that, well, I think it's a pretty universal human experience. You are walking into a brand new environment.
Oh, yeah, the absolute worst.
Right. Maybe you are meeting a new neighbor over the backyard fence, or perhaps you're walking into a classroom with a teacher you've never met. Or, maybe you are stepping into the break room on the very first day of a new job.
The tension is real.
It is.
Yeah.
You walk in, you shake hands, you offer a polite smile, and then the other person drops the most intimidating, open-ended phrase in the English language right in your lap. So tell me about yourself.
It is genuinely remarkable how a question that is meant to be welcoming can instantly trigger a fight or flight response. Your mind just goes completely blank.
Completely empty.
Exactly. You are a fully formed adult with decades of life experience, and suddenly you forget every single detail about who you are. You start with your career, your hometown, your age. It's a stressful moment for anyone. But the stakes feel infinitely higher if you are a beginner trying to navigate that exact situation in a brand new language.
That is the exact scenario we are looking at today. We are exploring material from the Minds in Motion podcast. It's created by two English teachers, Mark and Clara, and they've designed a framework specifically to help language learners navigate that terrifying moment of introduction without freezing up.
Yeah, they approach this in a highly structured, almost architectural way. The mission for our deep dive today is to unpack Mark and Clara's magic script for self-introductions. They take this massive, intimidating task of summarizing your entire identity, and they break it down into 5 simple, manageable Lego blocks.
Lego blocks, I love that.
Right. And the core idea is that anyone, regardless of their proficiency level, can assemble these blocks to confidently communicate. What's fascinating here is how a simple English learning exercise actually reveals the core mechanics of human connection.
It's so true.
We are looking at language instruction on the surface, but underneath that, Mark and Clara are outlining the basic social architecture of how two strangers begin to build a relationship from scratch.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really like that Lego block analogy. It makes an overwhelming task feel modular and approachable. So if we're building this introduction piece by piece, where do Mark and Clara suggest we actually start?
They start with what they call the door to the conversation. This is the greeting. You literally cannot invite someone into your life without opening the door first. And just like real doors, you have to choose the right one for the building you are walking into.
Makes sense. Context is everything.
Exactly. Mark and Clara break this down by context. If you are stepping into a formal situation, say a high-stakes job interview, or a very traditional corporate environment, you need to use a formal door. They recommend sticking to the time-tested classics. Hello, good morning, or good afternoon.
Those definitely establish a baseline of respect. But life isn't just a series of job interviews. What happens when you use a formal greeting in a completely casual setting? Like, if I walk up to someone at a backyard barbecue and say, "Good afternoon," it feels like I'm about to hand them a subpoena.
It really does. It creates immediate social distance, which is the exact opposite of what you want an introduction to do. That is why the framework provides informal alternatives for relaxed settings.
Like parties or coffee shops.
Right. If you are at a party, meeting a friend, or just striking up a conversation at the dog park, you need to open a casual door. Mark and Clara suggest keeping it simple with, "Hi, hey," or "Hi there." Mark actually notes in their lesson that he leans heavily on "hi there" when he's out at the park.
Hi there is great.
Yeah, because it naturally forces a warmer, more approachable tone of voice.
It strips away all the pretense. So you've opened the door, and the very next step is obviously telling them who you are. The second block is your name. Now, on the surface, this seems like it should be the easiest part of the whole process. But is there a trap here for language learners?
There is a surprisingly high amount of anxiety wrapped up in this tiny step. Beginners constantly ask which phrasing is the quote-unquote correct one to use. You generally have 2 options, the traditional "my name is," or the more direct "I am" or "I'm."
I can see why that would cause a mental roadblock.
Right.
When you are learning a language, you are desperate for rules.
Yeah.
You want someone to tell you option A is right and option B is wrong so you don't look foolish.
Precisely. The vulnerability of adult language learning is that you are an intelligent, capable person who is suddenly reduced to communicating like a child. You overthink every syllable.
Oh, absolutely.
But Mark and Clara highlight a very comforting nuance here. Both choices are perfectly acceptable, they just carry a slightly different rhythm. My name is is very clear, standard, and traditional.
Right.
Conversely, I am, or the contracted I am, is incredibly common in everyday rapid speech. It is a bit more casual. The takeaway they emphasize is to stop worrying about the perfect choice and just pick the one that feels most comfortable in your mouth.
Once you've successfully opened the door and handed over your name, the conversation usually hits that brief, expectant pause. The other person is waiting for the next piece of the puzzle. The natural pivot is usually geographic. Where are you from?
This is the third Lego block.
Yeah.
Location. Humans are inherently tribal. We like to place people geographically to understand their background. The most basic format Mark and Clara provide is functional and direct. I am from, and then your country. For example, I'm from Italy.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Mark and Clara don't just leave it at that basic factual statement. They introduce a variation that seems incredibly minor on paper, but it fundamentally changes the dynamic of the introduction. They suggest using the structure, I'm from a country, but now I live in a city or country.
It is a brilliant pivot. Think about the difference between those two statements. I am from Italy is a static fact. It is a closed loop.
Right, it doesn't leave much room to grow.
Exactly. But I am from Italy, but now I live in Tokyo introduces a narrative. It instantly tells a little story about your life. You are no longer just a person from one place. You are a person who has made a transition, who has a history, who has experienced a change in environment. It adds immediate depth to your identity.
It gives the listener something to grab onto.
Yeah.
When I hear that someone moved from Italy to Tokyo, my brain immediately generates 5 follow-up questions. I want to know what that culture shock was like, why they moved, and what they miss about home. Mark and Clara use their own lives as examples in the lesson, right?
They do, which grounds the exercise in reality. Mark explains, I am from Canada, but I live in Spain. Clara uses the example, I am from the United States, but I live in Germany. By adding that second half of the sentence, they are rewarding the listener's attention with a micro-story.
Which keeps the conversational ball rolling. So we know who they are, and we know their geographic story. The next natural curiosity people have is about how you spend your time. This brings us to the 4th block, work and study.
The framework provides 2 very straightforward structures here. I work as O, or I am O. But this is where Mark and Clara pause to address a grammatical tripwire that consistently derails language learners. It is the rule of A versus N.
Which seems like such a tiny detail, but I imagine it causes a disproportionate amount of panic in the moment.
It causes massive cognitive overload. When you are introducing yourself, you want to be present, maintaining eye contact, and reading the other person's body language. But if your brain is frantically trying to remember grammar rules, you freeze.
You completely lock up.
Exactly. Mark and Clara clarify the mechanics simply. If your job title starts with a vowel sound, A, E, I, O, or U, you use an, like an engineer. If it starts with a consonant sound, you use A, like a nurse or a student.
The vowel sound distinction is tricky. I'm thinking about someone who works in an office. You'd say an office because of the O, but you'd say a teacher because of the T. Having to process that mid-sentence while already nervous is a tall order.
And that is exactly why they build it into a standardized script. They want you to figure out your specific A or an ahead of time, lock it into your personal Lego block, and never have to think about the underlying rule during an actual conversation again. It removes the cognitive friction.
I really appreciate that they also address the reality that not everyone's identity is tied to a traditional 9-to-5 job. When someone asks, what do you do? And you're between jobs, that can be an incredibly embarrassing or awkward moment to navigate, especially in a second language.
It touches on a deep vulnerability. Society often equates our value with our occupation. Mark and Clara are very intentional about providing alternative blocks that fit different life stages.
That's incredibly helpful.
It really is. They offer the phrase, I am looking for a job, which is honest and forward-looking, and I am retired for those who have finished their primary career journey. It ensures that the learner feels seen and has the vocabulary to describe their actual reality without feeling ashamed.
It is about having the tools to be authentic. And that idea of authenticity leads perfectly into the 5th and final block of the framework, which is where you finally get to show some real personality.
Yes, the hobbies block. Up until this point, you have been exchanging demographic data, your name, your location, your employment status. Hobbies are where you move from data exchange to actual human connection. The sentence structures they provide are simple. In my free time, I like, or I enjoy.
I imagine there's a strategy to which hobbies you choose to share here. If I meet someone and immediately say, in my free time, I enjoy competitive underwater basket weaving, That might stall the conversation just because it's so niche.
It might stall the conversation, or it might make you the most interesting person in the room.
Fair point.
But you hit on a crucial strategic point. Mark and Clara emphasize that mentioning a hobby isn't just about listing your extracurricular activities. It is a deliberate attempt to find common ground. They explain that if you say you like football and the person you are talking to also likes football, you have instantly bridged the gap between two strangers. You have a shared reality.
You've found your tribe, even if it's just a tribe of two for the next 5 minutes. They list a bunch of universally recognizable hobbies to plug into this block. Reading, cooking, traveling, playing video games, watching movies, gardening, listening to podcasts, hiking, and playing the guitar.
The genius of that list is its variety. It ranges from highly solitary introverted activities like reading to active outdoor pursuits like hiking. It gives the learner a broad enough vocabulary to express their genuine interests while remaining accessible to the person they're speaking with.
So we have all 5 pieces on the table: the door-opening greeting, the name, the location narrative, the occupation, and the hobby. How does this actually sound when you snap all these Lego blocks together?
Mark and Clara both provide full demonstrations of their own scripts to show how modular the system is. Clara provides a slightly more formal, highly enunciated version. She says, "Hello, my name is Clara. I am from the US, but I live in Germany. I work as a designer. In my free time, I like gardening. Nice to meet you."
It hits every single beat perfectly. It's clean, it's polite, and it gives the listener multiple things to follow up on. And Mark provides a contrast to that, right?
He does. He uses the exact same 5 blocks, but he swaps in the casual phrasing we discussed earlier. His version sounds like this.
Hi there, I'm Mark. I'm from Canada and I live in Spain. I am an English teacher. I enjoy hiking and playing music. Happy to be here.
So what does this all mean? We have this incredibly tidy framework. But why does this specific combination of information work so effectively to bypass that initial awkwardness we talked about at the beginning of the deep dive?
This is where Mark and Clara pivot from teaching vocabulary to teaching the psychology of communication. The core philosophy underpinning their entire lesson is that a successful introduction is not an information dump. An introduction is an invitation.
An invitation. That completely changes the framing. You aren't just reciting your resume at someone.
Exactly the opposite. When you offer these specific details, the fact that you moved to a new country or the fact that you love gardening, you are dropping conversational hooks in the water. You are actively inviting the other person to engage with you.
Giving them an easy entry point.
Right. Mark and Clara point out that if you say, "I like cooking," you are handing the other person the tools to say, "Oh, I love cooking too. What's your favorite dish to make?" You have successfully guided a stranger out of the awkward silence and into a genuine, organic interaction.
You are doing the heavy lifting for them, which makes them feel comfortable around you. But because this framework is designed for people learning English, there's a giant, terrifying elephant in the room. What happens when you bravely drop that conversational hook, but you trip over the grammar? What if you get nervous and say, "I from Japan," instead of "I am from Japan"?
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario that keeps adult learners awake at night. The fear of sounding foolish or incompetent in front of a native speaker. But Mark and Clara address this head-on with what they call the golden rule of their classroom. Mistakes are okay.
It sounds so simple, but it is incredibly hard to internalize when your ego is on the line.
It requires a complete shift in perspective. They emphasize that the ultimate goal of an introduction is communication, not perfection. If you drop a verb and say, "I from Japan," the grammatical structure is flawed, but the message is delivered flawlessly. The listener knows exactly what you mean. The primary function of the interaction transferring information was a success.
And most people out in the real world aren't grading your grammar with a red pen. They are just trying to connect with you.
Mark and Clara offer some really practical advice for smoothing over those inevitable bumps, don't they?
They do, and it has nothing to do with vocabulary. They advise learners to simply smile and speak slowly. If you bring warm, positive energy to the interaction and you don't rush through your words out of panic, the exact grammatical phrasing matters significantly less. The listener responds to your demeanor much more than your syntax.
That makes total sense. People remember how you made them feel, not the verb tense you used. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the true value of this magic script isn't just knowing the 5 steps. It is the profound confidence that comes from repeated low-stakes practice. Mark and Clara explicitly tell their students to practice the script out loud in their daily lives. Clara even suggests doing it in the shower or while driving.
I love that. The shower is the ultimate judgment-free zone. If you mess up your vowel sounds while shampooing, nobody cares.
But the psychological benefit of that is immense. By rehearsing those 5 Lego blocks over and over in a zero-stakes environment, the sequence moves from conscious, labored effort into automatic muscle memory. So when you actually step into that new break room and someone drops that terrifying "tell me about yourself" question, your brain doesn't have to scramble for vocabulary. It bypasses the panic center entirely. The automatic script just takes over.
You just hit play on a tape you've already recorded 100 times. It frees up your mental energy to actually pay attention to the person you're meeting, rather than silently panicking about whether teacher starts with a vowel or a consonant.
It allows you to be present in the moment of connection, which is the entire point of the exercise.
To wrap up our deep dive today, let's quickly recap the architecture of this introduction. You start with the greeting, selecting the right door for the occasion. You provide your name. You share your location, ideally adding that little narrative of where you're from versus where you live now. You state your work or study. And finally, you offer your hobbies, dropping that crucial hook to find common ground. By mastering that simple modular structure, anyone can walk into a room and confidently invite a connection.
It is a profound takeaway from what initially looks like a basic language exercise, and it leaves us with a really compelling idea to chew on. Mark and Claire's framework proves that adding just one simple detail, like a hobby or a location transition, transforms a boring transactional greeting into an active invitation for a relationship.
Which is pretty powerful.
Right. So, what would happen if you started treating every mundane interaction in your day through that lens? Think about standing in the grocery store checkout line, sharing a quiet elevator ride, or waiting for everyone to join a routine video call. What if you stopped treating those interstitial moments as chores to endure and instead saw them as opportunities to drop a tiny low-stakes micro-invitation into the world?
That is a brilliant challenge. Just leaving a little conversational hook out there, waiting to see who might pick it up, it completely changes how you view the strangers around you. That is definitely something I'm going to be experimenting with this week. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We love unpacking these everyday concepts with you.
Thank you for your time and for your curiosity. Keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.